My name is Mana Kia. I'm in the Department of Middle East, South Asian, and African Studies here at Columbia University, under siege. I also wanted to thank the organizers and co-sponsors, the Middle East Institute, my own department, the Society of Fellows, and the Heyman Center for Humanities, and the Institute of Comparative Literature and Society. I also want to especially thank Erin Fay and Lindsay Schramm for all of their help. This is the last event we're doing this year in a series that is called Against the Grain, Gender and the Fraught Politics of Translation in Persephone Worlds. And it came together basically because I started thinking about how English has no formal history in the Persephone countries of West and Central Asia, unlike a place like the subcontinent. But British and American involvement from before the Cold War to the World War on Terror to today's tensions have created fraught political relationships against which Anglophone readers receive the translated works of various writers, Iranian, Afghan, Tajik, and their English language diasporic counterparts. So some of these authors embrace particular ideological stances and as a result enjoy a certain kind of international acclaim, according to the wider foreign policy exegesis of Euro-American countries. And there have for a long time been critiques from Edward Said's Orientalism onward of these kinds of representations. And so one of the things that we really wanted to do here in this series is to bring those writing in old and new genres to discuss lesser known views into the life worlds and expressive practices of Persephone writers. In the spring events have focused on, we called it In Their Own Words, Iranian Lives and the Personal Essay. And the idea was to think about this kind of flourishing genre and to speak to the authors writing in this form who live and work in Iran, and to include Salar Abdoh, who's translated their works and this form more broadly into English for over a decade. And as professional writers, filmmakers, and journalists, they offer views of life in Iran that are far lesser known to Anglophone readers. So we titled this event Lived in Real Time. And I'm going to introduce the speakers, and I'm going to then just sort of ask a series of questions for both of them and for Salar. And afterward, I'll open it up to audience questions. And if you're on the webinar online, you could just email those questions to me, and I'll read them out loud. Sara Mokhavat is a graduate in film studies and directing from the College of Cinema and Theater in Tehran. For her feature film effort in The Guns of Nane Kardar, she was a finalist as Best Female Role in the 2011 Fajr International Film Festival. Her novel, A Woman Who Was Found in the Lost and Found, was published in 2017, and her play, Goodbye, My Cherry Orchard, was staged in 2018. Her first short film, Shogun, was made in 2019, and her second film, Private, was shown at the 2021 Chicago International Film Festival, and it also won the Directors Beyond Borders Prize at the Discover Film Festival in London. Her latest film efforts are Lovebirds, 2023, and Home, 2024. And her essays have appeared in the Marquez Review. Vali Khalili is currently the managing editor of the economic magazine Ayande Nagar and a reporter for Tragedy magazine in Iran. He studied communications and journalism at the Azad University of Tehran, and ever since has held positions at some of the most important journals and newspapers in Iran, including Sharq Daily, Etemad, and Hamshahri. He's a co-writer of the volume Without Smoke, Fire, and Blood, in 2021, which deals with America's unprecedented economic sanctions on Iran. And his reporting and essays have appeared in such international venues as The Atlantic, the Madcaz Review, and what is this? Asymptote? Asymptote. He has also twice been nominated for the prestigious True Story International Award in Switzerland, and once for the Private Eye Writers of America Seamus Award for the short story Fear is the Best Keeper of Secrets in the collection Tehran Noir, edited by Salar Abdoh. He also has 2 anonymously written essays in the collection Women, Life, Freedom, and he lives and works in Tehran, and I think they both do. So Salar Abdoh was born in Iran and splits his time between Tehran and New York. He's the editor of Tehran Noir and the author of several novels. Out of Mesopotamia, including recently Out of Mesopotamia, which was a New York Times Book Review Editor's Choice and one of Publishers Weekly's Best Books of 2020. His most recent novel is A Nearby Country Called Love, which was just released in paperback by Penguin and called, quote, a complex portrayal of interpersonal relationships in contemporary Iran by the New York Times and brutally poignant by the Washington Post. A prolific essayist and translator as well, Abdoh teaches in the MFA program at the City College of New York. So as I read the essays of these 2 writers, a number of my questions began to coalesce around several particular issues of gender and the broader experience of living and working in Iran, as well as translation and the politics of such broader connections with the world. Now, the question of gender in Iran is both of being a woman, but also of being a man, as well as the related issue of hijab, which far exceeds itself in significance and has for a long time, since Europeans first became obsessed with this item of clothing, ascribed many layers of meanings to it, and passed on this oversaturated marker of civilization to Muslim countries themselves, where it has become a battleground for so many other struggles. Across the Muslim world, social and political struggles have revolved around whether women choose to wear hijab or not, or should be required to wear it by others or not. So hijab is a synecdoche, a kind of stand-in for a whole sex-segregated social system that has political and economic consequences for women. That women must carry the marker of society is symptomatic of what post-colonial feminists have pointed out, that women's bodies across the world, not just in Muslim countries, have often been made to bear the burden of larger struggles. And ironically, this is often so at the expense of women's own concerns. So the translated essays of these writers are connected either by their date of composition or their subject in relation to the events of the Women Life Freedom Movement and the mass demonstrations that began in 2022 with the death of the young woman Mahsa Amini. She was for those of you who don't know, she was a young Kurdish woman visiting the capital of Tehran from her home province, where she was detained for wearing improper hijab and later died in custody. Now, many mass protests broke out, and what was kind of striking about them was their pervasiveness across the country, in cities and in usually quieter, smaller towns. As Amini was also Kurdish from one of the many border areas where underdevelopment and the unaddressed concerns of linguistic or religious minorities has fomented resentment and rebellion, protests spread to these areas. Though interestingly, it was articulated as solidarity and defiance to the government as much as anything else. So protests, as our essayists have discussed, were about many things: economic hardship, corruption, government attempts to control people's lives, as well as the lack of opportunities for younger Iranians who make up the bulk of the population. These protests gained international attention, and for a few weeks, there were widespread acts of solidarity with the imagined aims of these protests, as well as the familiar prognostications from the Iranian diaspora about how this was the beginning of the end of the regime. So Sara's essays show us some of the frustrations that go into being a woman in Iran at various stages of life, from going away to college, leaving home, going away to college, to pursuing a love of football, American soccer, and a varied response to the acts of solidarity by certain elite Western women. Vali's essays seek to make sense of their surprising, at times hopeful, and the often demoralizing aftermath of these demonstrations. So I want to start with a question for Sara. So your 3 English essays in the Madcast Review were all published in the fall of 2020, but their subject matter deals with a variety of times and places, though all of them foreground the kind of way in which they foreground their subjects through the struggle of being a woman in Iran. So in the essay Defiance, for instance, you recount a protest struggle against a misogynist religious studies teacher and the forms of solidarity and betrayal within the women's side of the student body. But it also shows something about the more everyday aspects of life, which some are more remarkable to an English language audience than an Iranian one, such as what it looks like for a woman to go away to college, especially to Tehran, what dorms are like, and how girls have particular restrictions on them, like curfews. At the end of the essay, the college protest fizzles out and is not able to make a real change. The religious studies teacher is promoted, and those who directly challenged him are punished. And you, the narrator, miss an opportunity that might have fast-tracked your career in many ways. So in the midst of describing the late-night events of the protest's climax, you say, quote, "To think that until a few hours ago, I'd been daydreaming about my screen test in the morning and imagining a whole new life ahead of me. Later, and not much later, I'd learned that life in this country was always going to be a version of getting to the threshold of something good, something worthwhile that you would give everything for, and then losing it all." So what comes through is the fatigue of struggle and the way that social structures and institutions produce losses that are so demoralizing. We get a sense of what it feels like to push forward in such a context. I used to say that trying to achieve success or even keeping up as a professional woman is like trying to walk down the block alongside men when you're waist deep in mud and they are not. It may be that some mud also inhibits men in Iran because of the larger context. But can you speak a little bit about what you try and convey about the experience of being a woman in these essays and how it might extend, how that experience extends to your professional pursuits as a multifaceted artist and novelist and actress, a filmmaker? And how much of this loss that you describe in the quote that I just read is about being a woman, and how much is it about other aspects of life in Iran?
Of course, the limitation and the boundaries, something like censorship, is for everyone, men or women. But it is obvious that the limitations for women are way more restrictive and tighter than men, okay? If I'm gonna give you an example from the field I once was trying to work on, I wanted to be an actress since I was a little child. So it was my very strong wish. It was my thing to be an international and great actress. I went through a lot for that. Okay, my parents are very religious people, very restrictive, and they were against it totally. But I wanted that so much. I wanted that so much that I find a way to fight it out. Okay, when I went to high school and they realized I'm going to pursue this for seriously, it was forbidden for me to go to the movies, or forbid to get a movie magazines, but I found a way around it. I got into the best university. I went to the best acting classes, and in the early stages, even I was cast in a very great TV shows. Okay, so I told myself, okay, this is it. You are in the right path. You work hard for it. Be cheerful and everything. But in that TV show, I realized little by little, this is not acting, you know? It was absurd because my whole body was eliminated. The role in the paper was an action role, but I had this huge scarf. My outfit was wide, loose, long, and I couldn't do anything on that. I had just my face. Every actress in Iran has to work with just the face, and that's ridiculous. It was the one point that I was disappointed, but I wanted to go on and I wanted to be great and everything. So the second issue comes up. I graduated as a screenwriter from the university. So I presented some of my scripts to the censorship committee because you have to do that if you want to proceed. And they told me, no, a woman cannot be a center of love triangle. Men can, because we are in Islamic country, and Islam allowed men to have several wives, and they can be playful. This is in their nature, but women are the center of family, the center of good family. We cannot, tell the society that women are, allowed to have a tendency to other men, and that's it. Besides, they told me a woman cannot be a rebellious. It's not something we want to teach our daughters. So your scripts are not allowed. Okay, it's the second aspect. We cannot, the roles are basically narrowed down to nothing. Crying wives, worrying mother, suffering for your children, that's it. Okay, so that was the second part. The third part, the saddest part for me, because I wanted to be international great actress, I wanted to work hard for that, was I realized you are not allowed to be involved in the international projects as a woman because they didn't have the limitations we have here. So another man cannot touch you. Okay, so if you get involved, if you wanted a better, greater career or something outside of the country, you have to leave. Something Gulshifte Farahani had to do. Okay, but for men it's okay. For men it's okay. They go there, they play, they ambitious, and they can go there. They do everything they want to do. It's okay for them, but not for us. So sadly, at some point, I thought this is some toy they given us. It's like they change the nature of things for you as a woman. It happens multiple times for me in life. Change the nature of something for you and expect you to fit in, but it's not a real thing. So I had to step back. I had to withdraw from my only dream, my biggest wish in life, because of my geographic location and my political situation, country. I live in this country, so it's not going to be a real thing. And I'm not going to be an international actress. And I don't have the view. I can't have the view even. So, yeah, of course, this is a major difficulties here for us. And men have many privileges, of course.
Because there was a moment when Sara froze, the audience might have missed a part of what she meant to say, was that Iranian actors, when they go abroad to act, they can, they can be engaged in actually touching their opposite sex and doing whatever needs to be done to make the movie happen. But Iranian actresses cannot do that. And because they cannot do that, if they do that, the doors of acting in Iran forever is closed to them and they have to stay overseas. I just wanted to clarify that in case some of the audience didn't catch that because she froze.
Okay, thank you. So I have another question. In your essay, Farewell to a Football Love Affair in Iran, you show what it's like to grow up a fan of a sport, right? Football/soccer. That you are both discouraged from playing or even being able to enjoy as a live spectator. Particularly striking to me was your description that at the end, your exclusion was mirrored in a disregard by the male players and their male fans. You write, quote, "This love affair was one-sided, a love I had fought to keep and for which I had been punished countless times. The football team Persepolis was a lover that could easily go on without me and never so much as lend a second glance." So you kind of stopped loving them because you realize they don't care about you. Then you have the opportunity to go to a somewhat random game, not with Persepolis. And it's in some ways, as a result, meaningless, except for the fact of your ability to participate publicly and collectively in it. You say in the end that nevertheless, quote, "What this was, in fact, was the slightest of cracks in the steel armor of exclusion that allowed us women to breathe just for a moment before the curtains came down on us again." Can this exclusionary one-sided relationship be extended to other facets of the life of the larger society and culture around you? And do you feel like it's part of what kind of connected to the frustrations that erupted in the fall of 2022?
Yes, of course. We always get excluded from many activities we love. Now if nowadays they are allow us to go to the stadium and watch the matches, that is because FIFA made them, and the place we are allowed to sit is a very tiny and divided section which is excluded from the rest of the stadium, okay, which is belong to men. All of that belongs to men. And at some point, our voice of protest to this discrimination was heard by FIFA, because women can try to connect with the FIFA in the social media, and FIFA threatened Iranian Football Federation to cut all of their team out of the international leagues. So they had to force to let us in that divided section. But you know what? Now I can go and watch football and enjoy it, but sometimes something you really want to happen in their time. When I was a teenager, when my cousins were allowed to go to the stadium and I wasn't allowed, and I basically stood up in front of the TV for a whole 90 minutes. Imagine myself in there, shaking flags, cheering, chanting, expressing my feelings like every other fan. And at the same time, I know it's not real. I know it's not real, and I'm left out of this great thing I love to be part of. And it hurt. And then I asked, why is that happening? Why is the situation is like this? My mother, my friends, my teacher always told me that meant for men. It's not the environment meant for a woman, because men are rude, they I don't know, cares a lot, or some ridiculous I don't know things. And part of me was so bothered with them accepting this excuse. Okay, they don't want to ask questions. They didn't want to ask questions. They didn't want to accept that they were left out too. So in women life freedom, the thing was that it was projecting the revolutions in women in Iran, in general society, actually, because women are started to ask questions. They wanted to have their own rights over their body, over their own thoughts, and they want equality. And men, for I think it was then men try to understand our situation, and they realized they had some sort of privilege that we didn't have, because back then, before that, they thought it is something very normal, it has to be like that, and they couldn't realize why someone like me is not accepting it. But after that, they try to put themselves in our shoes and stood by us. And so it was a great movement, and it was a process. It still is, and I'm so hopeful, because the new generation is not gonna keep up with the system uh, things.
Add something to what Sarah said. First of all, this essay that she has about playing football or soccer is I highly suggested for everyone, and it goes to the heart of one of the themes of this talk, which we're going to particularly talk to Vali about how it feels to be a man in the post women's movement in Iran. The team that Sara talks about, Persepolis, actually my father was its manager before the revolution, and then the team was taken away. I've known Sara for a long time. I knew she's a rabid fan of Persepolis. And long before the movement, the women's movement, I felt like I owed it to us, to Sarah, to Iranian women, and to myself, and the legacy of my father, to make her, I commissioned her to write this essay about how it feels to be a woman, love sports, particularly football, soccer, and not be able to engage in it. I highly suggest that particular essay, as well as all of her essays, both writers, but there was also a very deeply personal association with this particular essay, not just because my own family's relationship to that team, but also just being a man and owing a debt to your Persian women and what they go through.
Thank you. So the last question I have for Sara specifically is really about the essay Letter from Tehran on the Pain of Others, once again. And it's you kind of begin this essay with a constant sense of emergency that flavors the milieu that you live in. And in all your essays, you show us a kind of everyday sexism and misogyny that women have to grow up in and live with. And while I think that women in many places have to deal with misogyny and sexism, it scales and forms very greatly. And that difference matters. Even in the same place, things like ethnicity and class also make a huge difference. So in this essay in Letter from Tehran, your comments echo one of the most central critiques of third wave feminism: the fact that sisterhood is not universal and it is not without its hierarchies of privilege. So you articulate, you kind of describe your reception of attempts by women in other places to show solidarity with women in Iran. And you call these gestures, and explain that while this makes you and your friends in Iran happy, it's also fleeting and overshadowed by a kind of inherent lack of understanding that the essay links to an unquestioned position of privilege. You say, quote, then again, in response to sort of women cutting their hair and putting, recordings of it on social media, quote, then again, the world is always advertising itself, isn't it? Can you speak a little bit more about this disconnect and this kind of divide that you, as you call it? And I ask this because in a sense, you're pointing to a kind of failure of being able to translate the women life freedom movement to convey the meaning of these protests and for Western women to be able to understand that meaning. They make what was a serious set of events and their aftermath into hashtags of digital activism or a few keystrokes that signal virtue about themselves more than anything else. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I just wanted to hear you speak a little bit more about your sense of the divide between what you were experiencing and the kind of way it was responded to outside of Iran.
Yeah, women life freedom was a very fundamental and deep movement. And so I wanted to understand that people wanted to say that they feel us, but I couldn't realize how somebody cutting a little bit of their hair is gonna help us prevent, people from being killed in the streets, because it was an ongoing process. And at the same time, I saw it went viral and it became some kind of trendy things that it at some point was bothering us, because I saw some Spanish actresses just vetted her bang, so if she cut it, it's not uneven, and I was, what is what is it, I don't know what was that trend went, and what was that, but it wasn't supporting us. If I am going to getting involved with somebody's life and want to help them, especially as an artist, I try to feel them, make connections, and try to understand the roots of their problems and try to understand their situation deeply. Especially if I am an actress, I can relate much easily to other people. So, so I think it could be done many things. They could do many things, of course. Some of them did. I'm not saying everybody, but most of the people was just, pursue these trendy things that wasn't helpful, that wasn't raise any awareness. I think even it was a distraction, and at some point it wasn't show what is related to. Okay, that was, so for that I wasn't think it's so helpful for us. Yeah, that's my answer.
An excellent answer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sara.
Thank you.
Well, I wanted to ask Vali a sort of related question. I think about the disconnect in readings of the meaning of the protests and their possible outcomes from outside of Iran. And you address this in your essay when you say in Letter from Tehran, quote, but if you were to ask me if the Islamic Republic is going to crash tomorrow, I'd give you a definite no. I simply don't see any signs of that. A lot more still needs to happen, and also a lot is dependent on outside confluences. But hope for this actually coming to pass one day is stronger now than ever before in the last 4 decades. And this is something amazing to witness. So I wondered if you could speak to the role that this hope plays in how people live their lives. the regime hasn't changed, but you describe changes in government enforcement of hijab, but also changes in how men and women relate to each other socially in the public culture of the streets. Can you say more about that?
بله سالار ترجمه میکنه.
I'm going to translate for Vali, but Vali John, it sounds like your voice is coming a bit in and out, so just let's make sure that we can. Go ahead. We can't hear you.
قصه این مطلب خیلی جالبه.
Something covering your microphone. Your microphone's sound is very muffled.
صدای من خوبه؟
نمیشه بلند کرد. اینانی که یه چیزی جلوی میکروفون رفته، نه؟
الان صدام خوبه؟
الان خوبه. It's good now.
خب قصه این مطلب خیلی جالبه. در اوج روزهایی که اعتراضات در ایران بود، اعتراضات زن زندگی آزادی، سالار به من ایمیلی زد و گفت که در ایران چه خبره. من شروع کردم به تعریف کردن این قصه در ایران که تبدیل شد به اون گزارش. سالار باز بگم یا تو ترجمه میکنی؟
You're a pro at this. Okay. During the height of the movement and demonstrations and such, I called Vali and asked him, "What's up? What's happening?" And that was the start of the report that he wrote.
خیلی جالبه که اون روزا خیلی مثل سالار با من تماس میگرفتن از جای مختلف ایران و میگفتن که دیگه حکومت افتاد، ما داریم میایم. خیلی ها میگفتن که ما چمدونامونو بستیم که بیایم ایران و من میخندیدم. میگفتم یعنی چی که میخوایم بیایم ایران؟ مگه چه خبر شده؟ آیا فکر کردین که اینجا همه چی تموم شده؟
During that period, a lot of Iranians abroad also would call with the same sort of questions. And they would say, well, we've packed our suitcases, we'll be in Tehran in 3 months. And I would laugh and say, you're going to be here in 3 months? Why? What's happening that I don't know anything about? Go ahead.
اتفاقی که افتاده بود این بود که ما با یه جنبش ناگهانی که البته از قبل هم منتظرش بودیم روبرو شده بودیم. ولی آیا همه چیز برای یک تحول بزرگ و یک فروپاشی آماده بود؟ نه، هرگز نبود. همون جوری که هنوز هم نیست به نظر من.
You know, it's not as if we had not expected something like this to happen, but all of us were taken by surprise by its magnitude and its suddenness. And we were not quite ready for it, but when it happened, ادامه بده.
اما اتفاق مهمی که افتاده بود و افتاده چیه؟ اینه که مردم برای یک بار دیگه فکر کردم به این باور رسیدن که میتونن شرایط جامعه رو به نفع خودشون تغییر بدن و این امیدوار کننده بود و همین شد که شعار این ماجرا زن زندگی آزادی شد.
The most important and salient thing about this movement was hope. It was for the first time in a long time, people actually were part of a movement and created a movement where they saw that they can actually instigate change, and that brought hope that had not quite been there before for a long time. Sometimes I just add certain things to sort of, because I've talked about all of this to Vali, I know his process of thinking, so I'll just add a word or two there. Go ahead.
امید در واقع این نیستش که، یعنی امیدی که در ایران به وجود اومده فقط این نیستش که مثلا یه حکومت بیفته، سقوط کنه، آیا برای جامعه‌ای که 40 سال زناش توش حجاب داشتن یا روابط اجتماعی آزادی نداشتن، تئاترای زیرزمینی خوب نداشتن یا نمیتونستن شادی کنن و الان در جامعه این اتفاقها رو میشه خیلی زیاد دید، آیا این تحول مهم نیست؟ قبلا اگر شما توی شهری مثل تهران در مرکزش راه میرفتین، به ندرت ممکن بود زنی رو ببینین که حجابش یه خورده عقب باشه، اما این روزا بسیاری از زنان رو میبینین که بدون حجاب تو خیابون راه میرن، یا تئاترای خیلی زیادی راه افتاده، پر از کافه شده تهران. شما یه شوری رو بین نسل جدید، نسل زد میبینیم و همه اینا یه امیده.
Manifests itself in many ways. It's not just about hijab. What this movement did was to create a, a joie de vivre kind of in the entire society that also includes the hijab. But if you walk around Tehran today and other cities as well, you will see women walking around without hijab, and those who want to wear hijab wear hijab. There are many cafes, there are many theaters, underground theaters functioning, coming up with excellent things. And all of this combination of things happening in the capital and other cities has created a sense of hopefulness that's the core of any society.
خیلی جالبه که خیلیایی که خارج از ایران زندگی میکنن به ما میگن که جنبش مهسا یا زن زندگی آزادی هم که به نتیجه نرسید، هنوز که حکومت هست. و من میخندم، میگم که آیا تصور داشتین که اینجا مثلا یه انقلاب اتفاق بیفته؟ آیا این همه تحولی که اتفاق افتاده، آیا این تحرکات اجتماعی، مطالبه گری مردم، اینا رو نمیبینین و اینا رو میخواین ساده انگاری کنین به یه حجاب یا به یه چیزای این شکلی؟ آیا عمق تحولات جامعه ایران براتون مهم نیستش که رخ داده و واقعا بعد از این ماجرا همه چیز عوض شده؟
People, Iranians, get in touch with me from overseas, people in diaspora, and they always have the same refrain. They say, well, this movement also didn't end up with anything. It was defeated. And whenever they say that, I have to laugh, and I tell them, can't you not see? And of course they cannot, because most of them have not been there in decades. Can't you not see that what this movement has done for our day-to-day lives in Iran? Go ahead.
به نظر من این نسل جدیدی که تو ایران اومدن، فراتر از این که هنوز حکومت سر جاشه یا نه، دارن خواسته هاشون رو مطالبه میکنن، متحد پشت هم شدن، شادی رو بین خودشون دارن تقسیم میکنن و فضاهای جدیدی در ایران به وجود آوردن که ما قبلا اصلا اینو تجربه نکرده بودیم و همه اینا دستاوردهای خیلی خیلی مهمی هن که به نظرم با توجه به اینکه من معتقدم ایران توی دوره گذاره، اینا دستاوردهاییه که لازم بود اتفاق بیفته برای آینده ایران که حالا توش حکومت کی میفته یا چه اتفاقاتی میفته در آینده.
This new generation of young people in Iran, they have created, well, Vali actually calls it happiness. They've created happiness amongst themselves, and they've created hope. And all of this is the post-Mahsa movement. And it's something that I call it's a passing stage. I think of it as a passing stage. Nevertheless, it's a stage that's necessary for us to get to the next stage in the future.
این نسل جدیدی که اومدن که من میگم امیدوارم به تغییرات زیاد، اینا دائم تو شبکه‌های اجتماعی هستن، انگلیسی خیلی خوبی دارن، از مطالبه گری نمیترسن، شجاع هستن و همه اینا امیدای جدیدیه که اتفاقا همینا دارن نسل قبلی رو هم حتی به جنبش و حرکت در میارن و به نظر من همه اینا یه اتفاقات خیلی خیلی مهمه در ایران و ما نباید اینا رو سرکوب کنیم، مثل خیلی از آدمایی که در خارج هستن و اینا رو سرکوب میکنن، میگن که بابا حکومت که هنوز هست، حکومت که نرفته، پس شما چرا اینجا زندگی. به نظر من این سمبل امیده و اتفاقی که خیلی مهمه و در ایران افتاده و ما داریم هر روز باهاش لمسش میکنیم و زندگی میکنیم. بعضی وقتا اتفاقایی که میفته حتی برای ماها باورپذیر نیست، یعنی ما میگیم اینجوری شد، چقدر عجیب، چه جالب.
We're going through something of the same here these days, but it's in reverse. Anyways, these young people, uh, these uh, these young people, they have access to internet. Even when things are filtered, they have access to getting around it. Oftentimes, their English is quite excellent. They have access to the world, and they are not afraid of asks from the powers that be. And through those asks, through those demands, they are teaching us, older generation, how to also make those demands and those asks. And again, when people overseas, Iranians and also others, just look at Iran and say, well, your movement was defeated, nothing happened. It's just utterly laughable because they're not here to see the day-to-day things that happen in Iran. Things that on a day-to-day basis also surprise us. You know, we'll hear something in the news and we say, really? That took place? And this is happening every day.
ما تو ایران دنبال یه معجزه نیستیم، بلکه معتقدم این امید الان به وجود اومده و نسل‌ها به هم گره دارن میخورن و نسل زد در واقع به نسل‌های قبلیش امیدی داده و یه حرکت مهم تو ایران اتفاق افتاده که این تحولاتش تو آینده خیلی روشنه، تو فرهنگ، تو هنر، تو سبک زندگی و اینا چیزهای بسیار مهمی هستن. این جواب سوال من، سوال یک هستش.
To sum up, we here in Iran, we're not waiting for a miracle to happen. This hope that has come about, particularly through the generation the Gen Z. This was the first time ever I said Gen Z. I've never said it before. Yeah. This Gen Z Generation Z generation has taught us so much, and also by doing what they do, they have connected the different generations together. So there's hopefulness, and the best part of that, Vali is connoting here that it's waiting for miracles is not the way to go. It's just a day-to-day. Go ahead.
البته نسل زد در واقع از توی خانواده هاشون که در واقع نسل ما هستن و بعد از انقلاب به دنیا اومدن، بیشترشون حمایت و ساپورت میشه و این خب خودش باز یه اتفاق خیلی خیلی مهمه.
And also one other very important thing is that these young people, this generation Z people, Gen Z people, they're being actually supported by their families, because in the past it wasn't like that, but now in this day and age, those families are supporting them in making their demands, and this is a very new thing and very important thing in the history of Iran.
That's very interesting to think about the changes being really at the social level that are unappreciated because of a kind of fixation on the political alone. So I wanted to ask you another question, because I know that you work primarily as a journalist. And so this is really about what made you turn to essay writing and what writing in this way allows you to do that other forms of writing don't. And if you could just speak about, what you kind of, why they seem to be so concerned with gender and with hijab, and what your interest is specifically in having them translated.
شما چند سوال پرسیدین که من دونه دونه بهشون جواب میدم. اولا درباره اهمیت در واقع جستارنویسی در ایران میخوام بگم که سوال اول شما هست و اینکه چرا من علاقه‌مند بهش شدم. خود من اولین بار که با این موضوع در واقع روبرو شدم به صورت شخصی وقتی بود که من و سالار برای نوشتن یک گزارش درباره اعدام به یک در واقع محلی که دو نفر توش داشتن اعدام می‌شدن رفتیم.
I'll start. You ask several questions. Vali John, hold on. He's not coming through.
صدا میاد؟
جواب بدم یعنی ترجمه کنم. I'll start with your first.
دوباره بگم.
I'll start with your first question, which is how and why I started writing essays as opposed to reportage. It started maybe about a decade ago, I think, Vali John. When Salar and I we went to a public execution in Tehran. And I wrote about it, and Sara also wrote about it. Go ahead.
گزارش من یک گزارش توصیفی از اون فضا بود، اما مطلب سالار در واقع یک مطلب شخصی بود، چون در واقع این محل اعدام در نقطه‌ای بود که منزل کودکی سالار هم اونجا بود. اون از نگاه خودش و شخصی اینو نوشته بود و من برای مجله خودم این رو به عنوان یک گزارش توصیفی به عنوان یک روزنامه‌نگار نوشته بودم. اینجا من در واقع اولین باری بود که با یک جستار این شکلی آشنا شدم.
So we both went to this execution. It was a double execution in a public place by what's happening? Like he's. Oh, I see. Okay. So Sara and I both went to this public execution. So Vali wrote his piece in Persian for the newspaper he was working for at the time, and I wrote it in English for Garnica magazine. And Vali says that mine was a straight reportage of a public execution that took place. And when Salah completed his piece, I saw that he had made it a personal essay. The location of this execution was very close to the first house that he grew up in, and it's true, it was by a public park in the center of Tehran, not far from the old American embassy. And for the first time, I realized that there are other ways of talking about the same thing that goes beyond just straight reportage. Go ahead, Vali.
بعد از این من درباره جستار زیاد خوندم و همزمان با این اتفاقات در واقع مجلاتی تو ایران منتشر شد، مثل مجله داستان، ناداستان، که اینا هم جستارهایی رو از خارجی، نه از انگلیسی یا متنایی از زبانهای مختلف به فارسی ترجمه کردن و همزمان توی یک دهه گذشته در ایران یه علاقه به جستارنویسی و جستار خوندن راه افتاده. حتی در واقع چند تا انتشارات در ایران دپارتمان هایی درباره جستار راه اندازی کردن و کتاب های متعددی درباره جستار منتشر کردن.
So right around that time that Vali says, Vali and Salar published their essays about that public execution, was the beginning, this first stirrings of essay writing and personal essay writing in Iran in a systematic way. And there were several magazines, which also, when we talked with Habibeh Jafarian last month, she was like a very core member of that group of people that worked for magazines like Dastan and Nardastan, another magazine, which basically means nonfiction. And so these magazines came about, which focused on essay writing and nonfiction. They were the people were writing in Iran, and also they were translating a lot from essay writers, essayists from the United States and other places. And gradually, publishing houses also began to have, they'd never done this before, they began to have sections that focus solely on nonfiction and essay writing.
زندگی تو ایران برای آدم‌های شبیه من که روزنامه‌نگارن یا نویسنده هستن
I think they may have heard us back home. That's it.
No, I'm assuming that in anticipation of tomorrow, for some reason, internet is very down in some neighborhoods.
I mean, if you want, I can skip to the next question, which was for both of you. Doing that is not bad yet.
Yeah. Yeah, you can ask me and maybe he'll come back.
Okay, so I think because we're gonna give Vali a little time to unfreeze. And I will skip to the next set of questions, which were both for Salar and Vali and also just for Salar.
Okay.
Do you want me to go to the one just for you? Or-
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
So
Sara John, next time I'm in Tehran, I want the secret to your VPN and internet access.
Yes, of course.
ببخشید
I
یه
give
لحظه من قطع شد.
okay.
Go ahead, Vali John, you were saying.
در واقع اینجا بود که من شروع کردم به نوشتن در واقع جستار در کنار کارهای روزنامه‌نگاریم و خب این تجربه خیلی جالبی برای من بود چون داستانهای بسیار زیادی تو این سالها نوشته بودم یا دیده بودم چون من یه زمانی خبرنگار حادثه بودم، یه زمانی خبرنگار اجتماعی بودم یا خبرنگار اقتصادی و این فرصتی شد که بخشی از این متن‌ها رو به صورت جستار بنویسم.
It was after this episode of covering that particular report and working with Salar, I'd already had many years of experience in various newspapers as a reporter of this, like the metro section, things that happen in society, whether it's crime and other things. So I had a lot of stories in my arsenal that were just waiting, and basically Vali is saying he didn't know that he could do that, and then he started writing about them.
اما در واقع چرا مقاله های من به سمت اسی رفتن؟ چون که این تجربه های اسی نویسی و جستار نویسی در واقع انگار ابزارهای جدیدی رو به من داد که اون تجربه های شخصی رو بتونم بیان کنم. چون همیشه در روزنامه نگاری این خط قرمزی وجود داشت که روزنامه نگار قضاوت نمیکنه، روزنامه نگار از خودش چیزی نمینویسه و تنها روایت میکنه. روایت در واقع توصیفی که میبینه رو میکنه. اما در واقع جستارنویسی به من فرصت جدیدی داد که بتونم حالا نظر خودم رو هم بیان کنم.
Until that moment in my professional life, I had, there were these red lines that as a reporter I could not cross. I had to give straight reporting. I could not make comments about what I had seen, what I had witnessed, and the discovering the art of the essay it created these whole new dimensions for me to delve into what I was actually seeing that I hadn't done before.
یه نکته خیلی مهم دیگه هم اینه که مردم ایران الان علاقه بسیار زیادی به خوندن جستار دارن. در واقع نظرات شخصی و جستار تجربه های شخصی برای مردم ایران این روزا خیلی جذابتر شده از گزارش. کما اینکه ما حتی در شبکه‌های اجتماعی هم می‌بینیم که ایرانی‌ها خیلی فعالن و دوست دارن که در مورد هر چیزی نظر خودشون رو بیان کنن و نظر دیگران رو بنویسن، بخونن و خودش شاید یه جوری نشون میده که این مطالعه چیزهای شخصی نویسی در ایران خیلی مهم شده و برای آدما جالبه.
Also, just the society as a whole has become far more attracted to writing about the self and expressing the self, and but both in actual essay writing magazines and such, but also in the social media where people often weigh in different things. So it's a whole societal thing that's overtaking the country, and it's a good thing.
و چون در واقع تو ایران سانسور متن‌های رسمی وجود داره، تو روزنامه ها، تو خیلی جاهای رسانه ها، حتی کتاب ها، اینا علاقه مردم به شبکه‌های اجتماعی خب بیشتر هستش و این در واقع نوشتن از خودشون و دیگران و خوندن متن‌های دیگران براشون جالبه
And what
و میتونه یه بخشی از واقعیت ایران نشون بده. مثل اینکه مثلا در ماجرای زن زندگی آزادی خیلیا شبکه‌های اجتماعی رو دنبال می‌کردن برای اینکه ببینن تو ایران چه اتفاقی داره میفته.
Also, because of censorship, the reality of censorship, where so many things cannot be said in newspapers and media, obviously people go to social media in order to get news, to express themselves, and so particularly during this women life freedom movement, the social media played a huge part in actually helping people bring the news, but also begin to express themselves in a far larger and deeper way than they had before.
اما چرا من در واقع درباره جنسیت و حجاب می نویسم یا مقالاتی که شما بیشتر خوندین در این زمینه ها هستش؟ به خاطر اینه که ما تحولات و تجربه های نابی رو تو این زمینه ها داریم میکنیم که در خیلی از مواقع زنها در موردش تو ایران بیشتر می نویسن. من دوست دارم که از نگاه یک مرد درباره این ماجراها بنویسم و آدما فقط فکر نکنن که زنا دارن یه دوره عجیب و تجربه میکنن. دوست دارم که من نماینده اون مردایی باشم که این فضا رو میتونن در واقع توصیف کنن.
To answer the question about why I particularly write about the whole hijab issue is that we're experiencing all kinds of very interesting, sometimes disturbing things in Iran, and mostly on that particular issue, women are writing. But I saw that as a man, I also want to weigh in on this issue as a man and bring the point of view of men and myself to the arena, and that's why I'm also writing about the whole hijab issue.
و در نهایت درباره سوال
بگو تموم کن.
و در نهایت درباره سوال ترجمه، من این نکته رو باید بگم که ترجمه متن‌های شبیه من، جستار شبیه من از سوی افرادی مثل سالار اهمیت خیلی خیلی زیادی داره. به خاطر اینکه بیشتر خبرنگارا یا روزنامه‌نگارایی که از خارج میان تو ایران کار میکنن یا اونایی که در ایران واسه رسانه‌های خارجی مینویسن، در واقع از فرهنگ ایران، عمق اتفاقات در ایران شناخت کافی ندارن.
And finally, the reason it's important to see my essays and Sara's essay, our essays who are living in Iran and working in Iran, translated to English and other languages, is because when I see journalists, reporters, others come to Iran for a week, a few days, or don't even come to Iran and weigh in on a country they know very little about, or they just see as tourists for a few days, it really doesn't carry it really doesn't know how to say what we experience in this country. So to see our own experiences, us who are living day to day in Iran, translated and read and seen overseas, is a very, very important thing to us.
در واقع بخشی از خبرنگارای ایرانی که برای رسانه‌های خارجی می‌نویسن میترسن که آژانس‌هاشون تعطیل شه، بس همه واقعیت رو نمی‌نویسن. ولی ترجمه متن‌های شبیه متن‌های من و سارا و حالا حبیبه و دیگران از سوی سالار و افرادی شبیه سالار یه پل ارتباطی بین صدای واقعی مردم ایران و تجربه‌های واقعی با رسانه‌های جهانی و جاهای شبیه شماست.
This is an important point. Vali says that there are there are journalists of Iranian origin, for instance, who are living in Tehran, in Iran, and writing about Iran for foreign media organizations. But in order to keep their access and remain in Iran, they don't really report the reality of the country. They don't cross that red line. So they self-censor all the time. And whereas we who write essays, we don't have to do that. And that's a really important thing, to give the reality of this place to people outside of the borders of this country.
Yeah, thank you. That's actually speaks to one of the questions I had asked for you about the importance of translation. But I want to ask one final question and open it up to all three of you before I turn to audience questions. And I just want to remind those of you on Zoom, you can email me your questions. So the final question I really have is about style, and it relates to gender as well. So the question about style is both in relation to the representation of gender in these essays, but also how gender may articulate itself in these essays. So both Sara and Habiba Jafarian's essays, which we discussed in our last event, have a very intimate and personal tone, even as they present and comment on wider social and cultural issues. Vali's work reads more like dispatches, as does your co-authored piece in The Atlantic, which is called How to Be a Man in Iran. We could ascribe this difference maybe to Vali's main work as a journalist, but Vali's also written at least one, has written fictional stories as well, and Salar's primarily a novelist. So one of the questions I had was, is the difference in tone and style a question of gender? And does the position of being a man provide an authority to comment from a more omniscient perspective, for instance? And the reason I kind of asked this is that there's been a lot written on the question of whether an author's gender plays a role in how they write. And a lot of feminist critiques have pointed out that this gets mainly asked of women, because the default normative subject position of almost everything is inevitably the man, meaning that the man's particularity is erased and elevated to the universal position of the norm, where by contrast, women are always writing as women, or else they have to hide anything that varies from the male experience to write as the norm. And so there's a kind of moment in your co-authored essay where you frame the question as, quote, one that translates from Persian nearly word for word as, when that time comes, Iranian man, will you be a hero or will you be yellow? But let me ask something a little bit more open-ended, which is that in the aftermath of the 2022 protests, how has the masculine default been called into question, right? In what ways has the ability to kind of unthinkingly benefit from the position of as a man in a way that's not available to women affected what it means to be a man in Iran?
That's a heavy question. I need to take a class in the theory first, but Vali John, I'll give the floor to you, and I'd like to hear from Sara also.
ببینید، مرد بودن، همین سوالی که شما دارین، یه روز وقتی که من با دوست دخترم که الان همسرمه تو خیابون راه میرفتم، تو ذهن من اومد که اگر الان یک پلیس به اون گیر بده و بگه که حجاب سرت کن، من به عنوان یک مرد باید چیکار کنم؟ آیا باید دعوا کنم؟ آیا باید بترسم؟ آیا اگر زنم بیفته زندان من چیکار کنم؟ و همونجا در واقع ایده شکلگیری این گزارش به ذهن من رسید و دیدم که استرس مرد بودن حتی خیلی جاها شاید بیشتر از یک زن بودن هست اینجا، چون زن بودن خود آدما انتخاب میکنن که حجاب نداشته باشن، ولی مرد بودن شما باید حمایت کنین و حامی باشین یا تصمیم بگیرین.
I will start. I will start by the way this came to be. This particular essay in question came to be was my girlfriend at the time, who is now we're married. One day we were during the days or the right after the aftermath of the woman life freedom movement. We were walking down the street, and suddenly I was faced with the question: if the authorities suddenly stop us and they demand that she wear hijab because she wasn't wearing hijab, what was I going to do as a man? Was I going to raise a scene? Was I going to protect her? What was I going to do if they took her away? And that question became the central issue of my life during those days. And I began to think about what does it really mean to be a man in this time and age in Iran? And I also thought about how in some ways to be a man in Iran is very fraught, is in some places is actually more difficult than to be a woman, perhaps, because a woman in Iran at this time chooses whether they go out and wear a hijab or not wear a hijab. And that choice is already made. But I, as a man, I'm living in this sort of nebulous space where I have to decide at each moment how I'm going to react when that moment comes, which goes back to the question Professor Kia she just read that sentence: when that moment comes, will you be a hero or yellow? Which is almost word for word from the Persian expression, actually. Go ahead.
نکته اینه که درست شعار جنبش مهسا زن زندگی آزادی است و مردی توش وجود نداره، اما در واقع زن اینجا سمبوله و اگر این حمایت مردونه وجود نداشته باشه این جنبش حتما به نقطه‌ای نمیرسه. و من میخوام بگم که الان درگیری های مردها تو ایران خیلی وقتا روی خیلی از موضوعات بیشتر از زنها هستش و در واقع تحولات آینده رو این نباید جنسیتی تنها ببینیم و در واقع در کنار هم بودن اینها مهم هستش.
It's true that the title Woman, Life, Freedom doesn't have the word man in it. But at this time, in this aftermath, in this period, I think that in many ways men are caught up in all the various dimensions and challenges, if not more than women, but equal to women. And I think in the future, it's going to have to be, and it will be, not a question of gender, whether women do this or men do that, but it has to be a question of what Iranians are going to do about all of this.
و یه نکته هم که میخوام درباره استایل نوشتن بگم، من در واقع یک روزنامه نگار هستم که تلاش میکنم تجربه های روزنامه نگارم رو در قالب های مختلف بنویسم. یک زمانی ممکنه که از اون به عنوان یک ابزاری برای نوشتن داستان برای سالار کمک بگیرم، در واقع که اون تجربه های شخصی من در روزنامه بود و تنها تم داستانی به اون داده بودیم، یعنی تجربه هایی که اتفاق افتاده بودن و بخش زیادشون واقعی بودن و ما اینها رو در نهایت به هم چسبونده بودیم تا اون داستان شکل بگیره. و از طرفی در ماجرای در واقع اون گزارش آتلانتیک تجربه دیگه ای از جستا رو استفاده کردم، ولی همه اینا از روزنامه نگاری و قالب روزنامه نگاری میاد.
The core of my writing style, as the question of style that was asked, is at the end of the day, a reporter. I'm a hardcore journalist, and that's what I was trained in. And to this day, that's more or less what I mostly do. But I have come to veer into other directions like essay writing, or that fictional piece that I wrote for Tehran Noir. It's a brilliant piece, and Vali describes how he came to write it. It came from his years of reporting in Metro section, where he had covered all of these crimes and gone to all these, sketchy places of Tehran. So he wrote that fictional piece, which was actually shortlisted for a noir fiction award in the United States. Vali, to sum up, Vali says that I'm trying all of these different means of writing in order to say what I want to say, but at my core, I'm a trained reporter, a newspaper reporter.
Sara, would you like to say anything in response to these questions?
Of course, about the style and essay writing, honestly, I just started when Salar asked me to try something in that form, in the form of an essay, and I tried it, and I find it so interesting and freeing, because unlike the screenwriting that it has so much rules, it wasn't supposed to be in a certain way. It gave me freedom, and it let me express myself directly to my readers. So since I welcome everything that gives me the feeling of freedom, I loved it, because I don't have that much of freedom in my life in many aspects.
Thank you. And عذر میخوام با این سوالا کمی هم اذیت بود.
I just want to add for both these writers, I've worked with a lot of writers in Iran, and last month we talked to Habiba Jafarian. It's been a real pleasure to actually come to these friends whom I've known for a while and commission them to say to Sara, well, write about your relationship to sports and why you stopped, or write about your relationship to cinema and why you decided to go behind the camera as opposed to being in front of the camera. Or telling Vali, you have all of this, Tehran like nobody knows Tehran, Iran like nobody knows Tehran, you know all of the ins and outs of the labyrinths of the bazaar. Why not write a crime story about it? Or why not write about what it feels like to be an Iranian man in this day and age? Because they're all, as Vali says, there are all these people weighing in about a country they know nothing about. Let's tell the world about it. And so to see these writers actually suddenly, like, this light bulb goes off, and they start, they with trepidations, the first steps in the art, in the craft of the essay, and then the more we work with each other, their hand gets faster and easier, and it's a beautiful thing to see. It's a beautiful thing to be a part of a process of, and I think the art of the essay in a place like Iran is part of that whole thing, that whole stuff that's changing the country. There is a reason why people are writing and reading essays. There's a reason why so many American writers, all of the essayists, particularly essayists in the United States, North America, and also Europe, are being translated or have already been translated in Iran, sometimes in multiple versions. And this is all part of what Vali talks about, which is hope. And the other interesting thing, I'll finish with this, is that the system is allowing these to be published. So the system is talking with itself. It's not a system that's saying across the board, no, you cannot do this, no, you cannot do that. The system is beautifully at odds with itself. Sometimes it gets ugly, sometimes it gets hopeful. And as Gen Z, I can't say this word, Generation Z, my son is standing right there, he's Gen Z. All of this, I think all of this is just one big thing that's Iran today. And the importance of people like Sara and Vali and Habibeh, whom we talked to last month, is that these are the people we need to be reading and hearing from. These are they are in location, boots on the ground. And my job is to bring, sort of ferry their works across the bridge to this side of the water, this side of the lake. Oh, yeah, we have
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah, no, I did think that what's very interesting in some of the answers, really is about sort of why such a form of writing has become so popular and important in Iran, right? I mean, why specifically speaking about personal experience has such a reception in Iran, why there's a hunger for it, both in writing it and in reading it. And that's a sort of, these are the kinds of questions scholars ask. So I just wanted to kind of note that was circulating around in my head, but I also want to give the audience a chance to ask questions. So 1, 2 in the back, and 3.
Thank you so much for a wonderful, inspiring presentation. It gives me hope in many countries. 2 quick questions. The first is, do you see what you're describing as going back to Asia before Islam, in Iran before Khomeini, the kind of what was inherent in the culture? And second, do you see hope that these kind of circles of people will facilitate a political change, not just a cultural change? I know the regime is not about for tomorrow, as you said, but is there a hope that it will become more open and more inclusive in the near future? Thank you so much.
خیلی صداشون رو من نمیشنوم. میشه بگین سارا چی پرسیدن یا از من پرسیدن؟
سوالش بود که آیا سوال اول این بود که آیا این مردم این اتفاقایی که داره میفته یه حالت برگشت به قبل از اسلام هم داره. این سوال اول بود. و سوال دوم این بود که آیا خب ما خیلی درباره این حرف زدیم که آیا این اتفاقایی که داره میفته آیا امکان این که political change یعنی تغییر سیاسی هم بشه یا نه؟
من سوال دوم میتونم جواب بدم. سوال اول حالا خیلی مفهوم نیستش. هر تحول سیاسی در واقع مثل یه پازل دونه های متعددی داره و زمان مشخصی داره. اینکه فکر کنیم فقط اعتراضات اجتماعی یا یه جنبش اجتماعی میتونه باعث در واقع انقلاب بشه یا یه تحول اساسی، به نظر من این یک اشتباه خیلی بزرگه و این حتما یه تفکر اشتباهه.
Every major change is like a puzzle, and there are many pieces to any puzzle. So when people think that, let's say, a movement, a demonstration, something of that nature is going to come and suddenly change society from the ground up, I think that's incorrect thinking. I think everything, major changes like that have their moments. And for that moment to come together, many pieces of the puzzle have to come together. Vali didn't answer the question. I can just say that the first question about the before Islam and all that, it's there is some in Iran. There is some people who are into that, but it's mostly a diasporic thing. What is it?
I would also add that before Islam, women had the status of property. So you could kill a woman who was your wife or your daughter, and it would be the same as like smashing a chair. So I would think that it's probably not a good idea to go back to anything before Islam.
Yeah, I mean, there are people who have that inclination, but for this movement, I think that's really neither here nor there. They're like, Iranians have much more acute and immediate things to think about, you know.
And maybe a desire to move forward and not
Yeah,
back.
desire to move forward, not backwards. Sarah John, any thoughts?
No, I don't have any response to that because I don't know. Simply, I don't know any.
That's the
to
best
do.
response. Yeah, question.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was so inspiring and informative, and it got me thinking a lot, which I didn't think I was going to do this Friday morning. With this kind of revival of the essay and this like kind of revival of personal perspectives of daily life in Iran, it made me think about, you know, personal public spaces and private spaces and how that even existed within the architecture of the Middle East. There was always this thing that when you go behind closed doors, there's a whole life that happens. And in the public domains, you kind of suck it up and you act a certain way. And what's interesting with this third generation, Gen Z, and I say third generation because the grandparents were alive in the 70s, probably lost things, probably got traumatized. The parents came after. And so this is the generation that's born with two generations that dealt with the direct consequences of the revolution. And what I see happening is that there's the line between public and private is maybe being blurred, and kids are starting to realize, I think more than hope, it's about a love for life and loving your life in your country and wanting to live in your country freely. And what maybe these kids are trying to do is trying to be like, well, if I can dress a certain way inside the house, I can take it outside the house. If I can do this inside the house, I can take it outside the house. And I think this is really important to emphasize because there's such a problematic white feminist Eurocentric lens to always be like, all these people are always oppressed and these women are just like beat by these brown men. And it's actually a lot more, I think, more than complicated, it's linked to so many more things. So the really frustrating thing with the women life freedom movement is that people were kind of getting on with it because they took one element of the movement, which was women's rights, and neglected the whole history of how even the regime was put into place. They didn't even discuss how the CIA was in Iran during the Shah's time. And it's like, you know, I find it really beautiful to see that happening because I'm from the Middle East, but I am Arab. So I grew up watching one failed revolution after the next. And it's like, okay, you can put down a dictator, but there's never a strategy or a government or a system in place. And I think through these essay writings, through these underground spaces, from what you're saying from being in Iran, it sounds like the revolution is silent, it's slow, and it's intentional. And I'm wondering how that plays out on a day-to-day life. As much as there is a lot of trauma and pain and lack of determination, I'm wondering if you're seeing this kind of erasure between public and private occur.
I'll give a quick answer with an example, and then I want them to actually talk about it. Vali mentioned underground theater in Iran. I think I travel quite a bit, and nowhere on earth, as we speak today, have I seen a more alive underground theater community than I have seen in Tehran these days. It reminds me of the Eastern Europe before the Iron Curtain fell, and in these, the last time I was there, and I was talking to a lot of these groups who were in one building, and said, you know, obviously the powers that be know that you guys are here. They cannot not know. And said, yeah, they know, and they sort of leave us alone, and we sort of leave them alone, and we just when we have audiences, they're not huge, it doesn't get out of hand, so we do our thing. So it's as if that's talk of private and public space. It goes to the heart of what you just talked about, right? So the boundaries are slowly being erased, but as you said very well, it's a silent step-by-step revolution, which to me is the only way a country can sort of transcend itself and go to the next place. And it's the one thing that Vali has emphasized this over and over again in this conversation, is the thing the much of the diaspora doesn't want to happen. They want it now because they want to go back and get their properties back or whatever they want thereafter. But I'll stop and let these guys talk.
I think-
من یه چیزی میتونم اضافه کنم.
Yes.
من میتونم یه چیزی اضافه کنم. به نظر من ایرانیا خیلی خوب بلدن که خط قرمزا رو جابجا کنن به سمت خودشون و اینو بسیار بلدن. خیلی چیزایی که در خیلی جاهای جهان در ایران غیر قانونی محسوب میشه و تو خیلی از جاهای جهان قانونیه، مثل مصرف مشروب الکلی یا هر چیز این شکلی، برای ایرانیا اتفاق میفته ولی به صورت مخفیانه. مثلا زمانی داشتن ماهواره در ایران جرم بود، ولی الان و همچنان هم در قانون جرمه، ولی الان بیش از 90% ایرانیا ماهواره دارن. فیلتر شکن داشتن و وصل شدن به اینترنت، مثل همین الان که من نمیتونستم وصل شم، جرمه، ولی خیلیا میلیون ها ایرانی فیلتر شکن دارن. اینا رو بگو تا من یه تیکه دیگه اضافه کنم.
Vali says that Iranians are quite adept. I think not just Iranians, other places too. They're quite adept at moving the red line, towards their advantage. For instance, whether it has to do with things that are banned, alcohol usage, or making alcohol, or having VPNs, filter breakers, or having satellite dishes. All of these things are banned, and all of these things happen in Iran every day. We're actually on this Zoom talk, Vali says, via VPNs. So he stopped there. Go ahead.
تجربه خیلی جالبی با سالار بعد از زن زندگی آزادی داشتیم. درباره برادرش قرار بود که درباره تئاتر برادرش یه مراسمی رو به صورت خصوصی توی خونه خصوصی گرفته بودن. فیلمایی از تئاتر برادرش توی ایران پخش میشد که شاید خیلی جاهای جهان عجیب باشه اصلا اون فضا. خیلیا از دخترها و پسرها بدون حجاب دور هم جمع شده بودن و داشتن درباره در واقع کارهای رضا حرف میزدن. شما اگر که از بیرون فکر کنین مگه میشه در ایران همچین اتفاقی بیفته، شاید عجیب باشه، ولی من میدونم که ایرانی‌ها بلدن چجوری مبارزه کنن و اون چیزی که دوست دارن رو به نتیجه برسونن.
The gist of what Vali says is that Iranians know how to fight for what they want, and then he gives the example of my late brother's avant-garde theater. Two, 3 years ago, there was an event in this cafe. Actually, this house is also a cafe. Here's an example of where literally 200-300 people came, and on the video screens, these enormous, these big screens outside was being shown of the theater, and it's pretty wild underground New York theater. And you would not think, Vali says, that this sort of thing can happen in Iran with the audience, no one wearing hijab, men and women, young men and women, Gen Z together. So he says that Iranians know how to move the envelope to their advantage and get the things they want. It takes time, but they've learned how to do it, and no one does it better than Generation Z.
جمله آخری که میخوام بگم اینه که درباره همین حجاب، الان همه میبینن که خیلی زنا تو ایران حجاب ندارن، اما من میخوام بگم که این یه حرکت 40 ساله است. از زمانی که قانون حجاب در ایران گذاشته شد، زنای ایرانی به صورتهای مختلف شروع کردن به نافرمونی. اول چادر سرشون نکردن، بعد مانتو کردن، بعد روسریاشون رو کشیدن عقب. حرکت‌های متعددی کردن که در نهایت به برداشته شدن حجاب توی ماجرای زن زندگی آزادی تبدیل شد و فشن کردن، کارهای مختلف کردن و ما الان در واقع اون برداشتن حجاب، این حرکتی که از 40 سال پیش شروع شد تا امروز رو داریم به این شکل می‌بینیم.
In a way, this whole thing about hijab and women life freedom, it's something that's been going on for 40 years. It's not as if it just suddenly began and happened a few years ago. From the very outset of the revolution, women started their resistance toward the chador, the long black veil that you have to wear. They found every kind of means to fight against that sort of absolutism until we came to this point in history where they were finally able to take their hijab on the streets and walk freely.
Thank you.
I'd love to hear from Sara about this.
Yeah, I think as much as we love to move forward fast, we cannot. I don't think that is going forward, it's going to be so easy, so fast, but it will happen, hopefully.
I totally agree. Basically, Vali and Sara said the same thing. And this fear that Sara talks about, it can exhaust you. It can really exhaust you. You ask yourself, I want to I'm teaching a class. Let's say I'm a professor, or I'm a dancer, or or I do underground theater, and you go ahead and do it. But that fear is always there that someone somewhere is going to raise a issue, a red flag. And, when you have to live with that all the time, some people are better at dealing with it. And some people, the point of exhaustion gets thus that you'd say, okay, I'm going to leave this country if I can. So it's a real, it's one step forward, 2 steps back, 2 steps forward, half a step back. It is a gradual progression, as both these two wonderful writers say, but it's very slow. And this slowness, I think, it's also its strength. And that's why we need to hear from them. We need to hear from people who are there, living it from day to day.
Can I also just add an observation that when you're dealing with the kinds of slow, widespread social changes, these are not events that can be easily captured in a spectacular short form for social media.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, maybe require a more longer written form in order to convey them properly.
Absolutely. I mean, when Vali writes about just how it really feels today in the third decade of 20th century to be living in Iran as a man and wondering what he will do when he faces a difficult situation on the street, having to do with perhaps his spouse or mother or sister or just a friend, or when Sara talks about how it feels to be a woman and want to be a film, to be an actress, but coming to that moment in her professional life, that the tragedy of deciding that, no, she's gonna go behind the camera. These are things that only somebody, there is something to be said. I mean, people have made different arguments, but there is something to be said about authenticity, especially when we're talking about the personal essay form and nonfiction form. And I think just parachuting into a place like Iran, especially Iran, spending 2 weeks there, or getting on the phone call. I mean, oftentimes with newspapers here, I'll you know, like established newspapers, they'll say, we made a call to so and so in Iran and talked to them about such and such thing. And it's like, it's a bit laughable. So I've made it one of my life's goals to bring the words of people like Sara and Vali to the rest of the world. And we're going to continue this.
So we are at 2, but we did get started a few minutes late, and there's one more question live in our audience. So I want to give her a chance to ask if that's okay. بفرمایید.
یک دنیا ممنون، مرسی از صحبت‌های منطقی و خوبی که امروز کردید. Thank you so much for everything you said. It was the best realistic talk I ever heard outside of Iran for the past 20 years. I have a couple of questions. One is that, have you guys ever heard of any feedback from diaspora for the essays that you wrote, and if you felt that there was any room for communication and widen their view? And I also wanted to ask a question from Vali, and is that inside Iran, does he feel that his feelings as a man that is facing all these dilemma and the pressure, is that feeling is being ignored inside Iran? Does he feel that? Because like outside of Iran, and especially in diaspora, I feel that as soon as a man would say that, you know, we also face pressure, or like when I was living in Iran, I went through this pressure, and then suddenly other women in the group wants to say that, oh no, you don't understand, you don't know, you want to turn on the table on yourself and stuff like that. So just wondering if that is also happening inside Iran, or he feels that there is more understanding and more unity and more empathy in the society of Iran. And then at the end, if any of you guys has any advice for us outside of Iran, how can we help you?
You're going to make me cry. I'm inclined to say that there's a lot of empathy and understanding, but I'll let Vali speak to that.
ببین، فشار خب هست، اما چیزی که جالبه در واقع این همراهیه، این همراهی با زنان در واقع فشار رو به یک تجربه متفاوت جذاب تبدیل میکنه، اگرچه که سوالای بسیار زیادی ممکنه که در ذهن مردها وجود داشته باشه.
There is the stress and there is the pressure, and I think when Vali says stress and pressure, he means the totality of it, including your question, okay? But the most important, the key thing is that the genders, the human beings of whatever sex, they're working together. They're moving forward together. So whatever stresses and pressures are there, they're part of the whole thing. And the slow movement forward is happening with empathy, with understanding, and all of that. To answer your question about your first question, I definitely get reactions about these sorts of essays. Usually they're tremendously positive, both by other Persians or especially by readers from the English language, or for instance, some of Habib Jafaryan's essays, she'll call me and say, I just found out it was translated into Italian, to Spanish, into this language. That there's a lot, and I get a lot of asks about their essays and whether it can be translated. So there's a lot of positive. Sometimes when we try to write more nuanced essays, like one time I wrote a very short piece myself in Guernica magazine about the neighborhood, my neighborhood in Tehran, which is called, which it has various names, but it's also called the Avenue of the Crossroads of Faiths. Why is it called that? Because there's a mosque in it, but there's also a synagogue there. There are two churches and one Zoroastrian fire temple, all within 2-3 minutes of each other, right? It's in central Tehran. And I wrote about the beauty of that place and how much I love it, looking out of my window and seeing the synagogue every day until COVID. It was a working synagogue, and you know, I would see, you know, it was because it was an old Jewish quarter, and or passing by the fire temple. I've been in it. I've been with Vali, actually. Remember, we went together, which faces of Armenian church. So I wrote about that, for instance. This is one example, and some Iranians didn't want to hear it because they don't, in diaspora, they don't want to hear anything positive about Iran. They just want to hear negativity. That place is a prison, this, that. So I get that. I get that. People will email me and just, you know, just go off. But in 90% of the cases, when people read, you know, like they are absolutely astounded when they read something by Sara or by Vali, the nuances that Vali talks about, the things that Sara conveys in her essays, or Habibe Jafarian in particularly in that key essay that kind of started this whole movement, How to Be a Woman in Tehran, in Guernica magazine, I think in 2016. So the most of the reactions are very positive, but there are difficulties with the diaspora because they just don't want to hear anything positive about a place like Iran. And, you know, we have to live with that. And sometimes I even understand where that comes from, you know. But, you know, there are some things that you cannot really, I can't change that person's mind, you know. I can just put what I write out there and hope that one day they will come to what I have written. By being here, listening to us, asking your questions, reading us, reading Sara, reading Vali, reading Habibe, reading stuff that's being written over there by people who are living there. You know, it's not a bed of roses. We all know there's difficulties in that country, like real difficulties that on a day-to-day basis, people cannot imagine, you know, like very simple things, you know. Habibe talks about it in one of her essays about just to be a woman and want to rent a place of your own, you know, just that, you know, something that you wouldn't even think twice about here. So the best thing that you can do is to come to these events, ask your questions, be empathetic, and then tell others to read these people. You know, there's a lot of, I mean, Sara is also in the film industry. We know a lot of the Iranian cinema that comes from over there. A lot of it was really made kind of to order for audiences here. It has a definite bent. But when you read these essays that take time, they take time to really have interiority and talk about the place. It's different. It's a different thing. And we want people to pay attention to that more than anything. Sara John, you want to say something, or Vali?
من فقط میخواستم به این هموطن عزیزمون سلام کنم. خوشحالم از آشناییشون، خوشحالم که اینجا هستن و دقیقا جواب سالار کاملا درسته. همین که اینجا هستین، همین که دنبال جواب ها هستین، همین که جنبه های دیگه ای میخوایم ببینین فارغ از حالا سوشال مدیا یا چیزایی که به راحتی به شما پرزنت میشه، به این معنی که براتون اهمیت داره و به این معنی که تاثیرگذار هستین. ممنونم از اهمیتی که میدین.
gist of what Sara said. I want to a shout out to my compatriot here who just asked the question. And I ditto what Salar said, just by coming here to an event like this, listening to us, reading to us, asking questions, you're doing everything that you can do. And we were grateful to you. People like you.
Can I just also add that I think for everybody else also, there's something that a lot of different people, especially feminists, have made the intervention about how there is an ethics of solidarity. And that involves first and foremost listening before you speak.
Bravo.
And I think that that's a very good principle, especially given the kind of subject of solidarity, right? And that is something that we didn't always have in the diaspora when those protests were happening. And in fact, there were a lot of people stepping forward claiming to speak for others.
Mhm.
And I also wanted to make one observation about something Vali said about the feeling of being next to a woman who may be your partner, who has made a decision to take her hijab off, and you have to think about how you're going to react if something happens. And I would just say that this very experience may be the basis of the kind of empathy that moves social cohesion along, because in a sense, that is what women live with every day, where they have to deal with what is essentially the choice of others.
Absolutely. Very, very well said. I don't know if we have time, but I'll give you an example.
Okay.
Like one time with a friend who's a journalist and an editor, I have a motorcycle there, and it was right after it was in the thick of woman life freedom. And I was gonna give this person a ride to their home from a cafe, and she wasn't wearing hijab. And if you give a ride to a woman without hijab, they can't theoretically, there's cameras, they'll take a picture of your license plate. Then at some point they say they'll sleep it, meaning like you can't write, they'll confiscate it, and then it's a big hassle to get it back. So I said, I'll give you a ride, but then I came to say, I'd like if you could just put your hijab on. But I stopped myself because that wasn't the right thing to ask, right? And this friend caught my hesitation, even though I didn't complete what I had said. And she said, "It's okay. I'm gonna take a cab." And I didn't, push the point. But it really, I felt bad. But in that exchange that took all of 20 seconds, all of the issues of that society were in that one moment, right? It was pregnant with meaning. And, they in Iran, we in Iran, we have to live with that every day. It's like every day you're making these decisions that seem so ordinary here, but over there, they're really like philosophical issues. They're about being, about having agency. And in that moment, I, like Vali, understood what it feels to be a man in Iran at this moment in history. And I didn't feel very good about myself at that moment, I admit.
Maybe next time you put the hijab on your license plate.
Oh yeah, there was. I said to her that I'm gonna take the motorcycle lock, and because that's what we do, and put it on the, so they can't see it.
Yeah,
But by then she had made her decision not to give me a hard time, so I felt bad.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I mean, I think we're going to stop here. Thank you so much to our speakers. Thank you to our audience. This has been a wonderful conversation. Inshallah, I will have a chance to meet you in person soon.
Yeah, thank you very much. It
ممنون.
was such an honor for me to
Thank
be here
you.
with you guys.
Thank you very much.
These guys are my hopes, right there, these two.
We love you, Salar. You know that.
We love you. Bye. Take care.
خداحافظ.
Take care.
Bye bye.
خداحافظ.
خدا
Bye.
حافظ.
خداحافظ.